Welcome back to the Faculty Factory podcast, friends. It's Kim Skorupski here at the University of Texas Medical Branch with my new friend and colleague, Dr. Skip Brown. Hi, Skip.
Hey, Kim, how are you today?
So, folks, let me tell you, who is Dr. Skip Brown? He is a clinical professor in pediatrics here at University of Texas Medical Branch. He is the immediate past vice chair for clinical affairs, did that for about 10 years. Also, he was a chief medical officer. He is the director of Regional Women's Services Pediatrics. He is very active in TPS, the Texas Pediatric Society. In fact, was a past president and a recipient of the TPS highest honor, which is the TPS Charles W. Daeschner Jr., MD, Lifetime Achievement Award, given to recognize Skip's lifetime contributions to the health and welfare of the children of Texas. He's also active in Texas Medical Association. So he is here, there, and everywhere, all over the place, done all of the things, been recognized for his lifetime achievements. And I met him when I was convening a panel of recent retirees here at UTMB because, I'm a gerontologist and I do faculty development. And I said, geez, let's get some folks together who are at different stages in their journeys, thinking about retirement. Just recently did it, a couple years into it. So Skip was one of our panelists and had a great story, was so engaging and really captured the audience and had just a lot of words of wisdom. And then I set the call out and said, geez, Skip, would you be on the podcast? He said, sure would. So here he is. And let's take it away, Skip. Tell us about your journey. Give us kind of a brief look back and where we are and where you're going.
I first set foot on Galveston Island in 1975. I was a recent graduate of LSU in New Orleans and had been in Louisiana my whole life, but knew a couple of friends that were a year or two ahead of me in school who had come over here to train. And so that opened the door. And then I worked for 2 summers with a pediatric cardiologist at Daeschner Clinic in New Orleans. And he was a guy who was an absolute fireball, just the most engaging, wonderful guy to work for if you were a student. And you worked from sun up to sundown. It was great. I loved every minute of that. Anyway, Terry's background was that he had done his pediatric training at Galveston and then went to Duke for his cardiology fellowship. And I can remember well the day he said, well, where are you going for your internship? And I said, well, I don't know. I'm going to interview X, Y, and Z and all. He said, well, what about Galveston? And I said, well, I have some friends there. I'll probably interview there. And he said, sit down. So he picked up the phone and dials a few numbers in the old days when you actually did that.
And on a phone.
Yeah, on a phone. And he said, hey, Bill, this is Terry. Yeah. I got a live one for you. And
live one.
In the 70s, a lot of that still occurred because people had firsthand knowledge of who you were. And so they would pick up the phone and call Bill. And that happened to be Bill Daeschner. and who was Terry's department chair as well as a young resident. And
what's Terry's last name?
Terry King. He was a PD cardiologist and chief of cardiology and intensive care at Daeschner for years. And yeah. And so that's how I ended up in Galveston. I said, well, do you think I ought to go interview? And he said, if that'll make you feel better, you go right ahead. So that was a connection I didn't know anything about, but it was pretty intense apparently. And I know Dr. Daeschner had great respect for Terry King.
That's sponsorship. That there's an example of sponsorship.
Yeah, exactly. And
nominating people.
I can't tell you how I wish over the years, I don't know how many interviews I've done for residency and other positions, but you just would love to have that firsthand knowledge of what kind of work ethic does someone have? How dependable are they? I mean, it's a given that they probably have a pretty good body of knowledge. but all the rest of the intangibles are so hard to get your hands around sometimes. So anyway, that got me to Galveston, showed up here, scared to death, had no idea, just absolutely overwhelmed with the imposter complex, I'm sure. My first day was in ICU nursery. We're making rounds, and the attending that day was Joan Richardson.
Oh my gosh, a living legend.
Yeah, she was the second, she was in her just starting her second year of faculty. She'd done 1 year. And so I can remember maybe third or fourth baby we saw. She stands there and says, "Well, this little guy's pooping out. We need to get him on the vent." And he said, and she turned over there and looked at me and said, "Brown, intubate that baby."
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh. So
Oh,
it was actually one of the good things about having been to a large urban teaching center in New Orleans, because we had, I don't know how many experiences, but a lot. As a student, even it was the delivery numbers in a place like Charity Hospital in New Orleans were just insane, and we had a PICU and NICU that were just overwhelmingly busy. So I had a decent level of experience. And as I recall, it happened. I got it, but I don't remember the specifics. So anyway, Joan and I kind of kicked off a decent relationship that first year. And we stayed friends and in contact for a long time. And that served me well because I was grossly overtrained in neonatal ICU because of my rotations through there. And when I got into a community setting shortly thereafter, it served me well. So I finished my residency, entertained a fellowship, but kind of wanted to go find out what pediatrics was like because my dad was a pediatrician. So I grew up the son of a pediatrician and actually thought you had to be certified really crazy to do it. So I had a rebirth into pediatrics when I realized, everybody else is delaying the inevitable. Pediatrics takes care of people on the upswing. I like that. They get well. So that's kind of what attracted me to pediatrics. So in 78, left Galveston, went to Longview with some other friends that had trained here. And we started, four of us started a multi-specialty group of internal medicine, OB, and peds. And we grew it over the years, navigating every iteration of payment models you can imagine. And we grew it to about 120 docs, about 500 plus employees by the time I came back to Galveston in 2010, right after Ike. Was really one of the first hires made after Ike. And Joan Richardson was the department chair. And so life had kind of done that full circle thing. And so I worked for her. And it was a really good experience. I enjoyed it. I think one of the things, and I used to tell faculty when we would do interviews for new hires, one of the things about UTMB that I like so much is it doesn't cubbyhole you. A lot of institutions look at your credentials and you're cubbyholed, or you're hired for one thing and that's it. You're cubbyholed, and it's very difficult to break out of that. UTMB has an opportunity, or gives you the opportunity, if you have competency, work hard, and have some level of interest in an area that you can demonstrate adequately, if you show some interest in trying to add that to your repertoire of skills, they're going to let you do it and they'll be glad to have you. So it works real well and it helps develop faculty, and they get that opportunity if they're oriented in a way to grow, to acquire new skills. So I experienced that, in spades, so to speak. I really enjoyed my time as active faculty here. So met a lot of people that I still consider to be very good friends and had great professional relationships with, not just in peds, but across administration and in other departments as well.
Because, we know and now academic health is under incredible pressure right now. And people in my space, faculty affairs, faculty development, we regularly collect data, faculty satisfaction data, engagement survey data, well-being, wellness data, trying to look at pressure points and understand these tensions. I think we pretty much understand the tensions that are happening. And so you have this unique experience of having been in private practice for 32 years and actually having not in it, but actually building it and then
Yep.
being in it for 32 years. And now you're 15 years on the academic side. Can you kind of give us a bird's eye view of, I don't know, pros and cons of both, or your,
Yeah.
general advice when you've got young people now going, I don't even know if I want to go in academic health. That seems like a slog. Or I don't know if I want to, go in private practice. How do you kind of toggle those options in life?
Well, a lot of it depends on you having one of those talks in the mirror in the morning one day where you kind of confront who you are, what really interests you, and what kind of gives you the most fulfillment out of what you're doing. And you really have to be honest with that. And you can't answer that question based on what you think would be the right answer. You have to answer it on what's right based on who you are. And so if you're a people person and really enjoy Ms. Jones asking you a question after church on Sunday, if that is something you kind of like, then go do community stuff. Don't. I mean, you can get that in academics, absolutely, but it's not the most exposure that you'll get. You're a little isolated, and the academic practice setting is somewhat more insulated from that interaction on them. Not totally, but certainly in a smaller community like Galveston, you can have as much of that as you want. But for the most part, academics is more insulated from that day-to-day integration into the life of the community and you have to really go out of your way to incorporate that. Private practice gave me that in ways I mean, it's truly idyllic. I got the privilege of watching basically three generations of people. So grandmas, by the time I left practice, watched and they at the time would say were moms of 10-year-olds when I came to town, and their kids grew up, had kids, and then their grandkids were getting married and having babies. So I had a relationship with families that went through three generations over a 33-year period.
Wow.
And it was I can't describe that. I don't think people get that as often anymore. And it's really tragic because it's what will make you come back to work no matter what. You will have days where, it's the day from hell, literally, and nothing is working. I mean, nothing is panning out well. And all of the outside externals are just literally covering up what anything that seems really fulfilling. And then out of nowhere, you'll have something that occurs unexpectedly. And it usually, for me, had to do with an interaction with someone who would give you some feedback that you weren't soliciting. It was just offered. And it really made you take stock of where you were, what you had, and no matter what, I'm coming back. This is where I belong.
Yeah.
And so for my little limited skill set, it fit real well.
Well,
And
it's
and and you get to a point after your kids are grown and everybody's off establishing their own families, and you kind of go, well, maybe it's time to try a different way to do this a little bit. And I actually ran into Joan at a Texas Pediatric Society meeting, and we were shooting the breeze one day, just the two of us. And she said, "You ever thought about coming back to the department?" And I said, "No, I'm fine." And she said, "Well, I have a project that we're getting ready to take off with, and I wonder if you'd come down and let's just look at it and see if it interests you at all." I went, "Okay, that's fine." I went down in December. I could not make up my mind. I just could not. When you stand back and look at your practice and the practice that you have participated in building and think about leaving that, it's just, no, I can't make that decision. I just cannot do it. Just make it obvious to me somehow. And I really didn't have that. I just had, I guess, the knowledge that I'd kind of been there, done that, and got the t-shirt, so to speak. And if I were going to do something different, it had to be then, or it just wasn't going to happen. And the idea of missing out on the road not taken, so to speak, was just more than I could say no. So I called Joan and said, if you still want me, I'll come do it. That was like April.
oh,
And yeah, and I came on board August 1 of
uh-huh.
that. So
Well,
uh I,
but it's so Skip, you said something during that story that really underscored a point for me, and that is you talked about the story of in community practice and the motivation, the encouragement, the inspiration to go and keep going is oftentimes in those unexpected
mhm,
recognition or compliments. And that tells me that in academic health, where you don't maybe have that luxury of that intergenerational knowledge and being able to pull those threads through. And I'm sure some people do, but and then especially if you think in academic health, the non-clinician faculty members who don't have that
mhm.
um, end
Yep.
result of touching the patient and seeing the value of their science, or maybe necessarily seeing the value of
Well,
their educational work, that we have to demonstrate value. We have to appreciate more directly. We have to be very purposeful
yeah.
in expressing
But there's
value.
a resource. There is a resource. And you have to shift gears when you come from a community practice setting, traditional private practice, and come to academics. It may not occur, though, that gratification, that fulfillment, it's not going to occur necessarily with the frequency or the intensity that it occurs in a private practice setting, because it's going to come more from students and trainees, residents who you encounter and can help shepherd in whatever their goals are. And the fact that I still get phone calls, even though I'm not vice chair anymore, but I get phone calls from people who trained here over the last 10 or 15 years still to ask, hey, can I bounce something off of you? That's the same thing for me. It's just a different style, but it's the same thing.
Yeah.
So you get it in a different venue, but it's getting feedback that you are given because someone values what you told them, or how they had information. There's nothing unique about the information I have. What it is I try to put it in a way that's going to be well received and meaningful and helpful to people who I know are going to need it. So, having been down the path, I can tell you a lot of things not to do. And that's the University of Hard Knocks. I have a degree from that. You do private practice and build a practice for that as long as we did. You know some things not to do for sure.
That sounds like another podcast episode, or maybe at the end, if I don't want to talk about the things not to do, but get us to the point where, you're decades in and now you're thinking about, maybe I don't want to do this stuff full time anymore. How did
Right.
that clock start ticking, and how did that thought process evolve?
Well, once again, an interaction with residents who I watched transition to junior faculty status, and then junior faculty that I watched transition to more mature practitioners and teachers. And I realized one of the things we need to do is, the fancy term is succession plan, but you need to identify people who have interest and willingness to take on administrative duties and that sort of thing, for which there may not be a great deal of recognition and reward. Often, people aren't usually, but you get that from seeing things go smoothly for a while, or ironing out bumpy areas that you can contribute to better flow and process. As you begin to identify people who have those capabilities in your time, you begin to also realize that you can't be in that role, or shouldn't be, forever. You need to get people put into the right positions if you can, or shepherd them along so that they understand their strengths, and then get out of the way.
Can't be in that position the rest of your life, or shouldn't be. But you and I both know people who, on that latter part, shouldn't be in those positions, but they can't or won't let that go. What's your sensibility about
I
folks
think
who,
people won't let go of things often because there's something about that defines them.
mm,
And
their
that's
whole identity is only
often
in
the
that thing?
only definition they have. And that's a huge mistake. I've actually watched that in colleagues of mine who practiced, and I kept thinking, I don't understand why you're still doing this, because it doesn't seem to be something you enjoy anymore. And I think you would enjoy other things, but you got to have other things to go to. And I've been very fortunate in that I've had a lot of interests, and my kids laugh at me because it's like hobby of the month or something. But I love to learn new stuff, and particularly stuff I just have no idea about. And this is a good time. Anyway, when you make the decision that your department is like, we got some good people here, we need to let them blossom. And they're not going to fully blossom as long as I'm the roadblock that occupies this position. So it's time for me to move to the next stage and let them have their shot at it. And so that really was the motivator. And it was about the time the pandemic hit. I just thought, okay. And I really thought maybe I would retire about March or something like that, of 20, and maybe springtime. And then I thought, no, I feel like a rat crawling off a ship if I leave right now, because we had just, I mean, the weirdest thing in the world to a person who's basically operations guy for your department is to shut it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your whole fiber is all about how can we do more, and so we did. I mean, we shut it down and then brought it back up, and then in the fall, when we got to the point where we were back running as best we could, I thought, okay, well, this is a time to step aside. So I did, and I'm not sure the timing was perfect. I probably, looking back on it, I think there were some things that motivated that, but maybe another year, would have been, maybe even two. But it's splitting hairs at this point. So overall, I think the timing was probably pretty good.
Yeah. And how did you stage your pulling back? Did you have a Are you a spreadsheet kind of person? Are you a kind of a couple conversations? Did you kind of do a slow roll out? Did you have an abrupt departure? How did you, work somebody else through the process of how you came to be going in every day to not going in every day? How'd that happen?
Well, I think set, you have to have another one of those mirror conversations. And I'm keenly aware, having observed it in older colleagues of mine and observed it in family members, you, you, you can't go from 100 miles an hour to zero and survive that,
Yeah.
because it's going to take a toll on you from your mental health to whatever else you want to plug in and physical health. And that's all been documented. There are beautiful studies that if you do nothing after retirement, you have about 5 years and you're toast.
Yeah.
That's no joke. I mean, the actuarials who know their business very well can tell you that about males, at least, that if you are without significant interests and involvement, that you deteriorate so fast, it's unbelievable. So I didn't really want that path. I thought that I had some other things I really liked and wanted to do. So I made a list of those, decided those were doable for me, and I had a rough idea of the timing it might take, and that I would probably have the time to do them. So I wanted to start on doing some of that. I'm actually in stage 2 of that now, where
Oh,
I'm trying to find the next set of those, either enlargements or enhancements or something different, because I've kind of completed the original set of goals that I set out.
so when did you make that list? When you were still employed?
Yeah, yeah.
And how did you
I,
come up with the order of the list?
once I realized there were some people who needed to move, they needed to be allowed to move up and take on the responsibilities that I had. Then I was good with starting to make that list and come up with a definitive date to step aside. And I'll tell you that if you do it, I think correctly, it ought to be there ought to be a date. And the university kind of makes you do that if you don't want to. And I'm fine with that. But there's an informality, and you will continue to be involved as that transition occurs, and more involvement at first and less so 6 months later. But I mean, I actually came back and did a stint full time for a few months to fill in about a year later, and to help out during illness. And so I was fine doing that. That was kind of fun. It was a different perspective. So, um, I think there are just a lot of ways to approach it, but you've got to have some markers like this. Okay, it's time for me to make this move. I don't know the specific date, but I know it's time to do it. And then you have to come up with a date, and then you have to come up with the plan of what am I going to do? And don't come up with the date until you have decided on how you're going to handle your end of it. It's a bad idea, I think, if you have the option. If you have the option, it's a bad idea to make the choice, do it, and then come back and go, okay, well, here's all this time, and how am I going to fill it in? You got to have something on deck, and it doesn't have to be all of it. There's always room to add to it, but you got to have a couple things that you really want to do. And
Could you tell us what was on your first list and how you're now
yeah,
on phase two and then how those things have evolved?
yeah. Um, so always, I was one of these kids that, when I was about 12, the Cuban Missile Crisis was going on. And I had an uncle who was a electrical engineer, MIT grad, smart guy. And he bought me for Christmas one year a used radio. It was a shortwave radio, and then helped me put up a dipole antenna in the attic. And I got really enamored with that and loved listening to all the radio traffic at night, because it was all radio traffic then. And really enjoyed that, and always dreamed of having a license to do broadcast and being involved in that community, and never had the time to do it. Never had, I just didn't have the time. And so I decided I was going to do that. So I got, there are three different levels of licenses. So there's technician, general, and then extra class is what it's called. And so in a year's period of time, I went from technician to extra. So I got all three of them in a year. And then I got certified as a volunteer examiner. So I do the testing for the FCC.
What else you got for us? What else is on that list?
Well, I realized that I needed, for my own well-being, to be a little more involved in. I like to learn. I love to improve my knowledge because it needs a lot of improving. But I got very interested through a person who kind of shepherded me in that direction. And one of the people I practiced with for many years was one of the OB docs. And so I decided to get very involved with some of the activities in church. And I'm Roman Catholic, so formation process for what's known as a lay Dominican. The Dominican order has always, for 800 years, accepted lay people to share some of the work and effort and learning and that sort of thing that they promote. And so I sought that out, and it's a 3-year process. You do what's known as a inquiry year, and then 2 years of novitiate, and then you become a temporary. And so I am now second year of temporary, and I have another year to go, and then I'll be permanently professed is the term that they use. So it's been a lot of fun. The 4 pillars are community, preaching. They're known as the order of preachers. It's really not preaching. It's not about public speaking. It's about what you do and say, and that talks much louder than just words. And so study is another aspect. So they are people who value learning and are not afraid to be confronted on what they believe in, and they want you to be able to be a representative of faith and reason, so to speak. Being it's not a faith and reason are not at odds at all. That's not what we teach. So anyway, it's been a lot of fun, and I have to travel from Longview, which is where I live now, over to Dallas once a month, and we spend a day over there doing that. And I like it. I've met, once again, some people that I never would have met. There'd be no reason for me to interface with any of these folks.
What is the 4th pillar? Because I just can't have 3 on my list. Community, preaching, study,
prayer.
All right. So ham radio, lay Dominican. What else was on that list? You're like, I'm going to get back in.
I'm currently on call for Camp Fern.
Of course you are. Camp Fern.
In fact, when we get through, I'm going over there to see a couple of our walking wounded. Camp Fern is a camp up here in Northeast Texas that was started almost 100 years ago by a grandma who had granddaughters, and they kind of lived out in the country, and they had a really nice little place, but they were 15 miles, which in the 1930s, that was a bigger distance than it is now. So you didn't just jaunt into town to take your kid to ballet or something. So they had 2 girls, and they decided to start a summer camp for kids so that the kids would have somebody to play with all summer when they were out of school. And so they did, and it sort of blossomed over the years. And then finally, it got to a point where eventually that happens where there's really nobody else in the family that has the wherewithal or ability or interest to continue to be a full-time camp employee, basically, and run the place. So actually, my son-in-law, my youngest daughter's husband, who was an alumnus of the camp over many years, decided to buy it, and he bought it and took it on, and now has kind of distanced himself a little bit in the sense of not being involved in the day-to-day stuff, and it's basically restructured and recapitalized. And so when they decided to do that, then one of my partners in pediatrics, who actually lives at the lake, he and I started our pediatrics practice in 1978 and 9. And so Andy and I decided, well, they need a camp doctor. Why don't we split it up and make it doable? And we'll take a couple weeks at a time. And so I go over there, and it's my week, and this week and next week are my 2 weeks, and then I'm off for 2 weeks, and we do it through the end of July every year, and it's a lot of fun. It's boys camp and girls camp. So 1 month is boys, 1 month is girls.
Okay. How many kids?
About 150 each time.
Whoa.
Yeah.
How many counselors?
I don't know the number. There's 2 per cabin. I know that. And there's about 10 kids in a cabin. Yeah.
Oh, memories. Oh, I love camp. Oh, getting me into I got to stop myself. My mom going to start singing campfire songs. Love it. Love it. Well, Skip, you have quite the story. I love it. We want to get you off to Camp Fern.
Yep.
And if people want to get a hold of you, I'm going to leave the parting thoughts to you, but if people want to get a hold of you, they're going to get you through the ham radio, call sign AK5SB, or
you can look it up. It's on the FCC, and they'll tell you the contact. But if you want to contact me, my UTMB email is still active. I'm happy to try to answer any of that. So it's owbrown@utmb.edu.
That's right. O.W. Brown. And we'll have all his contact information, link stuff on his profile on the facultyfactory.org. And again, Skip, thank you so much for being here. And I'm going to leave the final words of wisdom to you. And again, been a great story. I love talking with you. We'll have you back. But what do you got to say to the folks before we peace out here?
Oh, it's an adventure that sometimes is difficult to navigate. And I love that term because once upon a time I was a sailor, and I love to sail, and navigation's critical. And it takes a little inside knowledge sometimes to do it well. And so take some time. Don't do it abruptly. Do it carefully. And don't forget to keep what made you successful in the first place on the forefront somehow. Don't abandon that. You have great ability to learn. You have great skills about that. So enjoy that and use that as your major strength as you pursue things that make you happy, and look for stuff that makes you happy. I don't think making a spreadsheet for productivity I don't think that makes me happy. I know I can see the need, but what makes me happy is to see the overall outcome and of a success. So keep that on the forefront. What do I want it to look like? What do I want to get done? Because you're the only reason it won't happen.
Oof. You're the only reason it won't happen. That's a good one to end on. I'm going to get you back here. I want to hear about your hard knock road journey, but that'll be another journey.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Thank you, Skip. Thanks for being here. See you folks on the Faculty Factory next time. Thanks for tuning in to the Faculty Factory podcast. We are a faculty development community sharing tools to build academic leaders in healthcare.
Maybe you want to be interviewed on the podcast? Please visit facultyfactory.org/contact and send me a message there. The Faculty Factory podcast and website is sponsored by the Office of Faculty Affairs at the University of Texas Medical Branch in Galveston, Texas.